Ho, ho, ho. Merry Christmas, everybody.
What did you just call me?
I love it. Old school joke. The magic of technology actually with you on Christmas Day, even though technically we're not here. So I hope you guys are well. And we thought it'd be fun to do a festive style list because you are, of course, settling down with your families on this day. And we thought we'd come up with our individual top 10 animated movies of all time. So hopefully we'll name some classics which maybe you've seen before and you love as well, but also it might be fun if we name some ones you haven't seen. It's an easy list for you, Rachel?
I love animated films.
Yeah.
Particular 2D animation. I grew up with the Renaissance era of Disney, so I really, in my humble opinion, got the best Disney era when I was growing up. And I have younger siblings, so of course I was always watching animated films, and I still to this day love animated films. There is a real magic to them that I think is just beautiful. So yeah, this was actually almost too easy. There were almost too many movies for me to put on this list, but I managed to narrow it down. How'd you go with picking out the list?
Quite hard, maybe just whittering it down and just making tough cuts because, yeah, like you, I've seen a fair few over the years, and there are some which I think are just stone cold classics, partly because I grew up on them and they had such a big impact and influence for me. Because when we're talking about some of these movies, they are like particularly aimed at kids and they are meant to sum up a particular experience. But you know, there's a magical feeling to some of them. But also it will be like there was some tough decisions for me because I wanted to go for a bit of a range of films.
All right, so my number 10 is a bit of a tearjerker. It is, and it would be higher on this list if I had seen it more often, but it's not a film that you rewatch that often because it is quite heavy, and that is the beautiful film The Iron Giant from 1999. So this is an absolutely gorgeous animation. This was produced by Warner Brothers Pictures, and it's set during the Cold War in 1957. And there it follows this child called Hogarth, who comes across the Iron Giant, who is a into outer space robot who has come to Earth. And the giant is programmed to destroy, but through his friendship with the boy and through him coming to Earth, he learns that he doesn't have to be a weapon of destruction. And as I was, going through videos as I was going through movies for this list, I was on IMDb, I was on TV Tropes looking things up, and I read that apparently the writer of this movie, the idea came to him, what he basically thought to himself, what if a gun was sentient and a gun didn't want to be a gun? It didn't want to be a weapon of destruction. And that's where the idea of the Iron Giant came from. And it's just a really beautiful story that has some very mature themes, especially for a kid's movie. Now, I'm not saying the kids' movies can't have adult themes because they obviously do, especially Disney movies will pack in things for the adults. But this movie, I mean, I first saw it when I was about 10 and I was really hit by like how intense it was and how, no, I must have been a little bit older because it came out when I was older, but I saw it when I was younger and it just really hit me the impact. Like there is a scene where the giant sees hunters kill a deer and Hogarth has to explain to the giant what death is and what life is and, the meaning between life and death.
Yeah.
And of course you have throughout the series, you have like, the Cold War scientist bad guy who's trying to get the robot for destruction and is trying to like manipulate the bad guys into letting out a nuke. And I'm going to go into spoilers because you cannot talk about this movie without talking about the ending, because the ending is what makes it so beautiful, which is that, after all of it's one of those typical, people are afraid of the giant because they don't understand the giant and the giant doesn't understand how he works in this society. But at the climax, the bad guys they do allow a nuclear weapon to be discharged and it's heading towards Hogarth's hometown. So of course the giant flies it into the atmosphere, and there's a beautiful running theme throughout the movie of the giant loving the comic Superman and believing that he can be like Superman. And then of course as he flies away, he says Superman, and it just, I'm getting teary just thinking about it. It is one of the most beautiful endings to a movie, like one of the most beautiful climaxes rather, because it's not quite the ending. But yeah, I think The Iron Giant is a bit overlooked. Like people do talk about it like being like a beautiful movie, and anyone who's yeah, anyone who's seen it talks about how good a movie it is, but there aren't that many people who have seen it. And I really do think it deserves more recognition and that more people should check it out. So if you haven't seen it, definitely see it. It is so, so beautiful. It's got some recognizable names in it. You've got Jennifer Aniston and Vin Diesel is the giant, Chris Macdonald, Mary Kay Bergman. So you Harry Connick Jr. So you've got a few, recognizable names from like the late 90s. But overall, I would watch this just for the themes of like love and friendship and, a robot learning. It's an old story, a being that's not particularly human learning to become human. But I do think this is one of the more beautiful versions of that story. So that's my number 10, The Iron Giant from 1999.
Yeah, it's a very strong movie. It's very nostalgic and throwback, but like you said, it's packed with sort of very humanistic themes in it. And I mean, obviously, as a big sci-fi fan, it's something I'm going to enjoy, and some of the ideas of science fiction, but then packed in a bit of a superhero type movie, or at least it's a film that's nodding to like classic superhero because of the link to Superman. And yeah, no, it's a really charming movie, a really like powerful and like really inventive movie, and just a great like coming of age style movie, I think, as well.
Beautiful animation.
Yeah.
Some of the forest scenes, like when you see the robot going through the forest, and of course the space scenes. Yeah, it is beautifully animated. Absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah, Brad Bird, who later went on to do The Incredibles
Yes.
and also did Ratatouille as well. So he's got quite a good track record when it comes to animated films. Okay, so my number 10 is a film that I watched quite recently for the first time, and I enjoyed it a lot. And it is The Great Mouse Detective from the 80s. So I always love when like animations, use a classic like story like this and bring in like classic characters like Sherlock Holmes, and he's got his own version of Dr. Watson in this case, and just put it in like an animated movie. Like it's such a fun idea to play with, and you've got like the beautiful picturesque London setting. I really like the use of fog in the movie. And it's quite an underrated Disney movie because at the time it flew under the radar and didn't actually do that well compared to some of them. I think years later it got a re-released and it probably did better then. But yeah, quite an underappreciated one. But it's got that Disney quirk of like somehow it makes, like these very everyday but not particularly, you would say, interesting type creatures in everyday life. It just makes them very cuddly and like fun and interesting, and it's got great dynamics between its characters. Somehow it even makes a bat like cuddly and fun. I don't know how it does that, but it must be the scarf or something. But I love the portrayal of London. I love, using this, because there is like a mystery at the heart of the film involving like this character's daughter who's like being kidnapped by the villain, and there is a mystery behind the whole thing. So I love it using like mystery type tropes in this fun animated kids adventure film. And bits of it are quite scary because there's a scene, I think it's quite late on, but there's a scene when they're sort of sneaking around like a toy factory, and the way they make these toys look, they do like make them look very like creepy and sinister in the dark like this. And I think it's partly because they're old-fashioned toys, and there's just something about the design that makes them a bit more creepy. And it's for kids of a certain age, it definitely would be quite scary, that scene, I think. And you've also got Vincent Price voicing the villain, and
very nice, nice.
He is having a way all the time. You can tell he's having a lot of fun, and he's a legend, and it just shows he was happy to put his talents to this, and he's having a lot of fun. So yeah, it's a cute, cuddly, fun story with one or two like quite edgy, scary moments. There's a fun nightclub scene. And yeah, it sort of has all the fun classic Disney hallmarks as well. But once again, there's just a charm to using like a Sherlock Holmes type gimmick, but making it work for like a family audience. So that's The Great Mouse Detective, my number 10.
Nice. That is one that I actually haven't seen. So the Disney animation, they have different eras, and this is from what's called the Bronze Age, which was about 1970 to about 1988. And a lot of the movies in this time I actually haven't seen. So I haven't seen that one, Oliver and Company, the Aristocats, all of these came out during this particular period. And this was just before the Renaissance era. So it was just a little bit before my time as a kid. But yeah, so I actually haven't seen a lot of those, but it's been on my to watch list for a while. And of course, everything's on the Disney Channel, so I will get around to it. And I agree, like anytime you take like a classic story like Sherlock Holmes and then you adjust it and make it for kids, you can have a lot of fun with it. And Disney in particular is very good at that. Obviously, we saw that with the Renaissance era. So no, that's it. That's a great choice. Love it. Alrighty, so my number 9 is another non-Disney film. They'll come in later. So this is a film that I absolutely adore. I have loved since I was a child. I also love the book that it was based on, and that is Fern Gully, The Last Rainforest from 1992. So I believe this one was maybe another Warner Brothers. No, this one was 20th Century Fox. And it's based on an Australian book, which is set in the Australian rainforest. Now, the movie is technically still set in Australia. You can tell because of the animals that are in it, but they're all voiced by Americans, so it's a little bit odd. But it has a fantastic voice cast. Samantha Mathis is the lead. So it follows a fairy, basically. It follows a bunch of fairies that live in a rainforest in Australia, and it's got a very environmentalism theme. So the main character, Krista, she goes to visit this older fairy called Maggie Loon, who's kind of like the Dumbledore Gandalf type figure, who warns her that this old evil called Hexus is going to rise again. And Hexus is basically pollution personified. He's like this gooey sludge that like wraps himself around like machinery and like sucks off the fumes and literally like lives off pollution. And over the course of the film, Krista actually comes across a human whom she accidentally turns into like a tiny little fairy size. So it's kind of like the fish out of water, learning about environmentalism and learning how humans have destroyed the rainforest and things like that. But it's a very fun, very quirky movie. Robin Williams voices this insane fruit bat called Batty Coda. He has a whole rap in it, which is fantastic. The Batty rap, everyone loves the Batty rap. And all of his lines, because it's Robin Williams, are obviously fantastic. He really lifts the character of Batty and makes him like a really, really fun character. Tim Curry voices Hexus, the evil pollution monster, and he is brilliant. Again, sleazy and slimy, and he has a song called Toxic Love, which everyone should go and listen to because it's brilliant. And yeah, I loved this film when I was a kid. It's the animation again is beautiful. You have a lot of like scenery, obviously, because it's set in the rainforest, so lots of green, lots of wildlife. But you get to see like a lot of Australian wildlife, which is really fun. And again, it's very, very 90s. Environmentalism was very big in the 90s. We were all about save the planet and be green and stuff like that. So you can definitely see that reflected in this movie. But it's also a bit of a gorgeous coming of age story because Krista's kind of your typical like headstrong young teenager who needs to learn to be responsible and lead the tribe of fairies and stuff like that. But it's really fun. A little bit chaotic. Sometimes you're watching it and you're like, okay, what are we doing here? Why is this scene here? But overall, it's a really fun, like really good movie, and it's definitely lifted by the voice actors. So, like I said, Robin Williams, Tim Curry, Samantha Mathis is the main character. Christian Slater voices one of the other fairies, and he's really fun. And yeah, it's just a really lovely little film that, as you get older, maybe loses a little bit of shine. I maybe do love this one more for nostalgia reasons, but I do think the voice acting definitely lifts it, and I think that everyone should check it out at least once because it is a fun little film. So that's Fern Gully, The Last Rainforest from 1992, coming in at number 9 for me.
Yeah, and it's one which has probably aged quite well because of the environmental themes, because like that stuff is even more of a factor now. Really.
Yes.
It's one on my list. I couldn't find it anywhere to stream otherwise.
No, it is hard to find for streaming, yeah. But if you ever do, we'll definitely check it out.
Yeah. And I think it might have been one that was a bit bigger in Australia than the UK,
definitely.
possibly because of it being based on the novel. So, yeah. Very nice. Good choice. Okay, so my number 9, I think, is the most recent of my list,
Okay.
and it's a Japanese animation, and it's a teen coming of age body swap film, which is called Your Name from
Okay.
2016. So I've seen a few films by this director. I saw his follow up, Weathering with You, which I also liked. His most recent film, Zuzam, I wasn't so keen on, but this film, Your Name, is definitely, I think, the best of the three. So it's sort of like a smart twist on the body swap teen formula, because you have these two teens, one's a boy, one's a girl, and they're in completely different locations in Tokyo, so
Okay.
completely different parts of Tokyo. And so this works in like the internet and technology for them over the course of the film to have this communication. But they are the characters who swap bodies, and so it'll be on certain days where they all have to share a body, and they don't revert back to themselves until late at night when they go back to sleep. And so there's a lot of themes to do with like kind of gender, and sort of a metaphor to do with transgender, really, and kind of like wrestling with your sexuality. I know one of the characters, I think it's the female teen, it kind of is having some anxiety over her life, her identity, and kind of wanting to be someone else. So it sort of plays with that. But it's it's a fun, sort of quite powerful and poetic like twist on like a coming of age body swap type movie, where the characters are, as I said, for most of the movie in different locations, and it really plays with that. Like, it really follows the two halves side by side, and their daily lives, their interactions, and obviously how they have to juggle this new identity, and how it affects their lives. And just, it's a beautiful, like, slowly developed relationship, as I said, over different locations, and it like builds up slowly to like when they're eventually going to meet later on. So it is a romance, but a different kind of romance, and it's a different kind of coming of age movie. And this director, I think he really likes to use kind of like weather conditions and locations,
Okay.
because like this film involves like different weather conditions and different like almost like a storm at one point, and it just sort of paints that stuff really beautifully. And also there is some mystery over what exactly happened, why they swapped bodies. And
Yeah.
it's one thing I like about the film, that they never actually 100% confirm it. Like, they hint at little things, but I don't think they actually ever confirm
Okay.
why they swap bodies. And I do like that about it. So it leaves it very ambiguous. And I think it's just one of the best films to do, to like, certainly recently, to look at very modern teens, look at like coming of age, to just put a bit of an original spin on the body swap. So it's very intense film, very powerful, very beautiful, and it just sweeps you along, really. There's a great like attention to detail with it, and you really get into both characters. So that's Your Name.
Okay, that's something different. See, once we get through my list, you'll start to see a theme emerge in my list, but sounds like yours will be a little bit more varied. So that's cool. I like that. That one's a little bit different. Very nice.
Yeah.
Alrighty. So my number 8, we have another kids animation, which again, like I said, you're going to start seeing a theme, but my childhood was fantastic for animated films. But we're still in the non-Disney era. So my number 8 is The Swan Princess from 1994. Now, this one is a little bit more of a guilty pleasure, because The Swan Princess is not the best animation out there, but it's a lot of fun. So this one was produced by... who was this one done by? I think it was New Line Cinema. produced
Right.
the Swan Princess. Now, this is very loosely based on the ballet Swan Lake, which, if anyone knows the Swan Lake Ballet, it's about a princess called Odette who was put under a spell by an evil sorcerer Rothbart, where she is a swan, but she can turn back into a human at night. She has a prince who is in love with her, and the spell can be broken if the prince makes a vow of everlasting love. Now, in the ballet, the prince, the idiot, makes the vow to the wrong girl, the Black Swan, which, if anyone's seen the movie The Black Swan, you'll know about all that intensity, and Odette dies. Now, obviously, this being a kid's film, they did not want that to happen, so they do what Disney usually does. They took a page out of Disney's book, and this is a slightly happier version. So we do have a happy ending, but it does follow a similar line. So you have Odette and Derek, who are the prince and the princess, and there's kind of this cute setup where their parents want them to get married, and there's this whole song called This Is My Idea, which is all about how the marriage is arranged, and these kids have known each other their whole lives, and you get to see them grow up and have like this rivalry, which turns into like this kind of, I don't want to flirt with you, but we're going to flirt because we're teenagers, until they're adults. And then Derek, the idiot, decides to let Odette know in no uncertain terms that he's basically just into her because she's hot. And when she tries to be like, well, you need to give me more, he kind of fumbles it. And before he can make amends, she and her father are accosted by Rothbart, and she's turned into a swan, and we get the rest of the story. Now, the Swan Princess is a little schlocky. They never quite kind of really work over the whole Derek only wanted her because she was hot angle. Like they do their best to smooth that out, but they don't really address it. But there is a lot of fun in this film. There's a lot of fun numbers. We have some really fun song numbers that are not quite Disney level, but that could probably be direct to video sequel Disney level. There are a couple of voice actors. John Cleese plays one of the animal friends, and the guy who plays Scully, Detective Scully in Brooklyn Nine-Nine, is another one of the voices as well.
Okay.
But other than that, there's not really anyone well known. But it is fun. The animation, I will say, is a little bit lesser quality than you'd be used to seeing of animations this time. But I think it's because New Line Cinema hadn't really done any animations before, so they probably didn't have the biggest budget. What's insane about the Swan Princess, though, has gone on to spawn something like 8 sequels. So it really took off. So there were originally 3 sequels. I own the 3-pack, which has all 3 movies, of course.
Nice.
But then they went on to do more and more and more, and now it's like a whole franchise. It's really crazy how this one movie grew to all of this. But no, I really love the first one. It's a lot of nostalgia for me. I was about 8 or 9 when it was first released, so I was right in the right age group. And we had let me show my age. We had the VHS when I was growing up. So we used to watch that a lot because my siblings really loved it as well. So my siblings and I would watch it together. And it's just, this is one of the few ones on my list that is really here almost only for nostalgia, because it's really not the best made film. That being said, it does have its good points. A particular YouTuber that we both like, Better with Bob, has a really fantastic essay that goes into the Swan Princess and actually really dives into why it's not that bad a film, and then really, kind of critiques it very well. But yeah, no, it's just nostalgic fun for me. It has some really funny lines. Like, the script is actually quite funny in places. The characters have a lot of fun, and there's some beautiful and really funny songs along the way. So yeah, I recommend checking it out if you have like a free Sunday, but don't go into it expecting like Disney level animation, because it's just not that. But it's fun, it's cute, and it's full of nostalgia. So that's my number 8, The Swan Princess.
Okay, nice. Yeah, I didn't know New Line did any animations, because you think of them as being the home of Freddy Krueger, of course. So very different. Number 8 is going back to classic Disney, and this is partly nostalgia and partly because I still think it's a great animation and big part of my childhood, and that is Dumbo. One of the very best for Disney, I think. And yeah, once again, this great example of Disney working in sort of fables and morals into their stories, because like back in like the 40s when this was released, it did shine a light on like animal sort of cruelty and like these archaic sort of like ideas that you get out of this fairground and the way they treat animals, and it has a way of just presenting Dumbo in this very cute, like childlike, cuddly fashion that really gets it across to kids. And yeah, you want to root for this character. Like, he has a really tough upbringing. Like, the film is surprisingly dark on that
Oh yeah,
stuff.
it is.
Like, Dumbo as an orphan, and I mean, what he's put through at this terrible like fairground, and that's one thing about classic Disney, is it does have darkness to go with like the light touches and the beauty of the animation, and the fun songs. Again, there's some fun, entertaining, uplifting songs in this. But we've both said it really. A lot of the things about classic Disney is that it's hand-drawn animation, so there's a care and attention. Sometimes locations just feel quite natural, but I think because of like the bright, vivid colors as well, you still have something which is left to the imagination. And like, this one is actually quite trippy with certain sequences. Like,
It's drunk.
Yeah.
And the dancing pink elephants. Yeah,
Absolutely.
that's freaky, man.
Yeah, no, because I rewatched it like, well, it wasn't that long ago. It was on TV, but I rewatched it, and you forget, then it does go places with the visuals, and I really love like the sinister sort of shadows, like with some of the fairground scenes, and particularly the villain of the movie. But then the kind of power and magic and the expressive sort of colors when Dumbo is like flying through the air, and like the way the clouds are captured. And it is a classic, this one, and it has held up. And yeah, it's one of Disney's best films, I think. So that's Dumbo, and it was a childhood favorite, and it says something. Then it captured my imagination at such a young age, and it taught me probably quite a lot about the world. And then when I watched it not too long ago on TV, I think it still holds up. It is one that has stood the test of time. So it's a classic sort of story, Dumbo.
That's a great pick. Dumbo is, it's from the Silver Age of Disney. And yeah, it's definitely intense. I haven't seen it that often because I find it so upsetting to watch Dumbo. The scene where his mother gets taken away from him, and the baby mine scene. Oh my God, Baby Mine is one of Disney's most devastating songs. And I definitely agree that it's a fantastic film, but for me personally, it's a little too distressing. And like, when I try to watch it, I get very upset. And I know it's a cartoon, but it's just so upsetting.
No, I mean, that is why they were so good, the early Disney films. They could actually do that to you.
Yes. That's a great thing. I'm guessing you haven't seen the live action?
Unfortunately, I have.
No!
I mean, I just saw it. I didn't pay to see it, so that was something.
Good.
But I mean, one of the things that was ridiculous is they make the face of Dumbo totally mechanical, and it's like, no, that's not the point. You're meant to have this sense of wonder, this sense of magic.
Exactly. Yeah, he's supposed to be he's a young elephant who's discovering the world around him. This is the problem with live actions: is you lose, again, like we talked about, that hand-drawn animation, the expressions that you can put on these characters' faces when they're in animation, as opposed to when they're CGI created. So yeah, sorry you had to sit through that, but we all have to sit through live action remakes of our faves. It's Disney entry, and I'm actually going the complete opposite to you, because I'm going with a much more modern Disney movie. I'm going with a Disney movie that was from what I think is called the experimental Disney era. This is just after the Renaissance era, but this is one of my favorite Disney movies because it is just the most random movie in existence that Disney, I think, has ever made, and that is The Emperor's New Groove from 2000.
Oh, yeah.
Now, I love The Emperor's New Groove, and the funniest thing about this movie is the fact is basically how it came about. So this was originally supposed to be another big Disney production, and it was going to be The Prince and the Pauper, and they had these big numbers written for it, and they had this whole storyline set out, and then everything kind of fell apart. I think the director left, and then an actor left, and then they didn't know what to do, so they reworked the script into this completely random movie about this emperor, Emperor Cusco, voiced fantastically by David Spade. So good. And Cusco is your typical vain, selfish leader. You know, he has a whole song at the beginning that's literally just Cusco, and everyone's like dancing, and they have river dancing in it for some reason. Anywho, so Cusco wants to, he has ordered a village leader to come and visit him. The village leader is played by John Goodman, and he is brilliant.
I love John Goodman.
Yeah, so good. And he basically, Cusco wants to level this guy's village and get rid of them and build Cuscotopia. And they have a fight. And immediately after they have a fight, Cusco's advisor, Yzma, who is one of the best villains in Disney history. She's voiced by Eartha Kitt, and she is fantastic.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and
excellent. I love Eartha Kitt.
Oh, yeah, you've got to see her. Yzma is so funny. Kronk is played by Patrick Warburton, who Scream 3 fans will know as Parker Posey's bodyguard, but you'd also recognize him from he's around, and Kronk is hilarious. Anyway, through a series of mishaps, Yzma, who is trying to overthrow Cusco, accidentally turns him into a llama. And then through a series of other mishaps, he ends up having to get the village guy whose village he was going to destroy to help him go back to the palace, find Yzma, and undo the spell. And then the rest of the movie is basically just all the hijinks that all of these four characters get into. And just the most random stuff. Like at one point they end up at a restaurant and Kronk somehow ends up working the restaurant's kitchen and turns into their chef momentarily. It's really hard to explain how random this movie is, but the chemistry between David Spade and John Goodman is fantastic. Like I said, Eartha Kitt as Yzma is one of the funniest villains ever in any Disney film. Yzma is brilliant. Kronk is fantastic. And it's just one of those films that you just laugh and laugh and laugh at the randomness. Like at one point, a storm cloud appears over the villains, but not over the good guys. And they all just kind of turn around and go, how did this happen? Like there's a lot of fourth wall breaking. Like Disney knew that they had like a really bizarre movie. So I would highly recommend The Emperor's New Groove to anyone who hasn't seen it, because it is brilliant and hilarious, and I just, like I said, absolutely love the randomness of it. So I'm actually really glad that we didn't get that overblown Prince and the Pauper storyline, because this one is so much better. So number 7, The Emperor's New Groove from 2000.
To remember, it got trashed by the critics at the time.
It did, but the critics sucked.
Okay, but so you're saying it's an actual good film, not just
it is actually. And I think the reason that the critics panned it is because it really was one of the first films that was released after the Renaissance era. So they were expecting more like Aladdin, Beauty and the Beast, The Lion King, and they got this really random, like higgledy-piggledy movie where like everything is just so bizarre, but it works. It really works. So if you ever want to watch it, definitely let me know, because I will watch it on stream with you, because it is so funny.
Yeah, I'm sure we can set that up. So it's so it'll be on Disney Plus.
Yes.
Okay, that's nice and easy. And I'll say also 9 times out of 10 I hate David Spade. So, but
I'm not the biggest fan either.
Like
but
this might fit him quite well.
Yeah, because you don't have to see his face.
Yeah.
You can just pretend
his face is very off-putting. Yeah.
Sorry, David Spade.
Yeah. I remember hating him in that sitcom, Just Shoot Me is free.
Just Shoot Me.
I remember enjoying the sitcom at the time, but his character I never liked. But, okay.
Fair enough.
So, we're not going to be starting the David Spade fan club up anytime soon. So my number 7 is my first Pixar movie, and it's sort of linked to one of yours because it does have environmental themes which I really like. But my number 7 is Wall-E, however you say it. But again, it's hitting my sci-fi sweet spot. Again, you've got this beautifully like computer generated post-apocalyptic feel to it, but it does have that environmental theme alongside the cuddly like robot type thing which like Disney like to do. And it just has a very, I think for a movie like this, like it's actually not that family friendly in some ways. It doesn't play easily to like a family audience. There's definitely moments it does, because the robot, as I said, is quite sort of quirky and childlike, but like just some of the themes and the way it's actually quite a slow, like played out movie and story, and just how expressive it is. But it does work in quite a broad way, where there are references for the adults. Like it does seem to be referencing quite highbrow, a little bit of like an older type movie, things like Silent Running or Blade Runner or 2001, Star Wars a little bit. Like the look of the ship and the first part when they're in space actually looks very much like the Alien ship. But once again, like Pixar, like classic Pixar, I would say, like it really goes behind the scenes. It really goes deep into like the control room and like everyone that's behind this big company, and like the robots. You've got a brilliant voice performance by Sigourney Weaver, who of course just has a wonderful voice. Yep, she's in this movie. It is a bit of a two-header, because like half of it is set up in space, and then the other half you sort of go to Earth and you see the conditions of Earth, and this is where like the post-apocalyptic stuff comes in. And I know for some people the second half of the movie probably isn't quite as strong as the first half, and I think that's probably true, but I think it does carry a very important message. And the design is just absolutely gorgeous, and it's quite inventive, but it's quite satisfying in the way it is playing, a little bit to an adult audience with all these different references as well. So it's a very strong movie, and I think a very different movie for like Pixar to be doing as well for the time. Like it does go full blown sci-fi, and I do appreciate that about it. So that is WALL-E, my number 7.
I've actually never seen WALL-E. It's
You
one of
haven't
those ones that
seen
I
it?
always meant to get around to seeing, and I just never have. So now I think I'm going to have to kick myself into action, because yeah, I've heard nothing but good things about this movie. Everyone who's seen it has said that they've really enjoyed it. The environmentalism that comes through, all of that. And WALL-E himself looks like a very cute character. I mean, I've seen GIFs and stuff. Like I constantly see the one where he puts the bra on his eyes and he's like, oh, So I definitely do want to get around to seeing it at some point, because it's one of those movies where I don't think anyone really had a bad thing to say about it. It was very well received when it came out. Like you said, something a little bit different for Pixar, a little bit more adult and mature, and just a little bit more sci-fi. But it definitely does sound like your kind of movie. Can understand why it ended up on your list. Coolies. Alrighty, so we are continuing the Disney streak for now, because my next pick is also a Disney movie. Now we are up to number 6 with this one. So this is my first Disney movie from my Disney era, which, like I said, was the Renaissance era, which I personally do think is the best era of Disney. And my number 6 is Mulan from 1998.
Oh, nice.
So most people have probably seen Mulan. I do think it was one of the more popular movies that came out of the Renaissance era, but I absolutely love this story. First of all, give me an Asian princess. Yes, please, absolutely. Always down for more Asian rep. Woohoo! Mulan herself is a fantastic character. I absolutely love the story of her, taking on a boy's persona to go off to war, to fight for honor. Obviously we get a little bit of Asian culture in, the matchmaker, and finding out the way that boys and girls were treated differently back then, and the different ways that they could bring honor to their family. Another movie with, again, the Renaissance era, in my humble opinion, had the best Disney songs. All of my favorite Disney songs are from this era, and Mulan is full of them. I think every single teenage girl understood Reflection. Every single teenage girl was singing Reflection and, complaining about how their family doesn't. I mean, I know I definitely identified with Reflection. Of course, you have I'll Make a Man Out of You. I mean, you put that song on and you can do anything, man. If you are having like a hard time cleaning your house or doing the dishes, put I'll Make a Man Out of You on and you will go, man. And, it's just a beautiful, it's just beautiful music. Now, I'm not usually the biggest Eddie Murphy fan, but I do like him when he's doing voices in movies. Because again, similar to David Spade, you don't have to see him. You just get the voice acting, which is quite good. And Eddie, and him as Mushu, as Mulan's little dragon guide, he is hilarious. I absolutely love Mushu. He's one of my favorite sidekicks. There's
Hmm.
some great voice actors in this one. Obviously, you have a really strong cast. You've got Ming-Na Wen, who
Oh,
voices
she's good.
Mulan. She is
She's good.
fantastic. BD Wong voices Shang, who's like her main love
Yeah.
interest. You've got like George Takei doing a voice.
Oh, nice.
You've got Pat Morita doing a voice. Miriam Margolyes does a voice. So you have a bunch of like really great like actors in there. The character of Mulan, I think, I love the Disney princesses. I really hate the slander that they tend to get, but Mulan is definitely one of the stronger characters, and her determination and her journey. And it's not just her finding her inner strength. She's actually finding out who she is. It's a very identity driven movie, and I think a lot of girls, but in particular Asian girls, we can really relate to Mulan, and the family expectations, and some of the culture things that are really implemented in Asian cultures, especially towards Asian daughters. And again, another one that's absolutely beautiful because, of course, it's set in China. So you have the beautiful scenery, you have all the architecture, you have all the costumes. The bad guys in this one are the Huns, and they may be some of the scariest bad guys in Disney history because they don't have a funny side. This is one of the few Disney films where the bad guys, they are not funny, they are just terrifying. And there are some really dark moments, like when their leader, they've captured a couple of soldiers and they want them to send a message, and as they let them free, he's like, how many men does it take to deliver a message? And his offsider just pulls back an arrow and is like, one. Moments like that really hit home that this is a slightly different type of Disney film. But yeah, overall, I really love Mulan. I rewatch it all the time. You'll always catch me singing I'll Make a Man Out of You when I'm trying to get like a difficult task done. And it's just, I think it's one of the best films to come out of the Renaissance era. So that is my number 6, Mulan from 1998. Do not watch the live action because
I was about to ask you about that.
No, so I tried. I got like 10 minutes into it and I was like, I can't do this. I cannot do this. Just watch the original.
Okay, interesting.
Much better.
Yeah, I'm trying to. No, I don't think I've seen the original. Like, it was definitely one that was on. But well, you said late 90s, didn't you? I was already a teenager. So
I was going to say, you would have been about 13, 14 by then. So, yeah. Or maybe even older.
A little bit older, yeah.
A little bit older, yeah. But, okay, fair enough. But no,
I will watch it. And I do like that they obviously cast a lot of Asian actors as well. That's important. And that's a great voice cast as well.
Yes, it is.
Pixar for my number 6. And this was a movie I rewatched earlier. And it's such a stunning movie. And that is Up from 2009. We were talking about this one the other night, and you said it's one of the most beautiful first parts of a movie.
Those first 10 minutes.
Probably ever. Yeah. And I would agree with that. And this, of course, got a Best Picture nomination, which it's quite rare for animations to get nominated for Best Picture. So, yeah, once again, I think there's a little bit of a sci-fi element in this, a little bit at times. And it does play with that a bit, like a little bit of sci-fi, a little bit of fantasy. I really love the metaphor about, almost like this idea of growing old and how kind of nostalgic, but also how melancholic and sad it is at times, and how, like, in the end, this older character sort of replaces his wife who is deceased, and with like almost this house, like he almost treats the house as in it is still her, and it's just really sad but also moving to watch. And it's just about that. It's about how the film opens with them first meeting as like young kids. So the film literally gives you their journey, and you see that they're really into like this inventor, like this particular inventor, and like he ends up being the villain of the film. And of course, who do you cast as villain? You cast Christopher Plummer. Yeah, he plays. I knew that was him when I heard the voice.
Yep.
He's so good in it. But yeah, you follow their journey as kids and just growing up together, and how they shared this. So it almost becomes his like passion in the experience. But it is a very relatable movie about how if you grow old with someone and then you lose them, you don't really know how to function anymore. You don't know how to interact with society. And but there is just something quite like human and quite like, I don't know, sad but also beautiful about this idea of him going up to the heavens a little bit. Like I think that is
Yeah.
a metaphor in this like house which is floating and being carried up by these balloons. It's it almost is playing with this idea of mortality, but I quite like the idea that this lead character sees almost like having a life which is up in the air. Like it's almost like a retirement home for him, because at one point, you know, the guys come along to try and take him off to the retirement home, and he pulls a fast one on them and he goes up in the air. But I sort of like him romanticizing that, how like, I'm not going to go into like an everyday retirement home. This is going to be my afterlife or my adventure, how I'm going to. And really, you know, meeting this kid who bugs him from the start, but then they grow a friendship over the course of the movie. And it's so beautiful because the kid is just like he was as a boy. So that works perfectly. Yeah, they just develop this really endearing friendship. But again, it really goes places because I totally forgotten about the mechanical dogs. So that was something. If you said there was going to be mechanical dogs in this movie at the start, you wouldn't have guessed that, really. And I like how they make, you know, the ones that are kind of loyal to the villain, they make them quite sinister and nasty, but still with their little bits of like comedy and like slapstick. But the one dog which becomes very loyal to like the protagonist, he's just lovely. And I do like how it just becomes like a heist movie or like this grand adventure type
Doesn't
movie.
it? Yeah.
Yeah, again, it's sort of a movie of two halves a little bit, where you get like this slow, really but tender human sort of drama to start off with, and this very magical film. But then you get something a bit different later on when you go on this classic sort of adventure, and the music is beautiful, you know, that sort of piano score that plays throughout. And yeah, no, I think it just ticks all the boxes, really. It's a very satisfying movie that is just a classic story, and a bit like classic Disney movies. It has ideas to it. It has heart behind the whole thing, and yeah, just a great film, really. I think very strong. So that's up.
It's a great pick. You know, that movie, oh my God, those first 10 minutes just broke my freaking heart. Just how do you
Yeah,
do
it's
that?
very
Just,
sad. Yeah,
it's beautiful. But no, I agree with everything you've said, you know, like Carl, and, you know, I love that thing that you said about the metaphor of him like flying up to heaven and having his different type of retirement home. I love the
yeah,
relationship between him and the kid, especially the bit where like he's up in the air and he's all happy, and then he hears a knock at the door, and the poor kid's just like outside on the porch, like, please let me. It's like, no.
yeah. That's so good. Yeah,
Yes, so
yeah,
good. And then I
yeah.
love at the end when he gives the kid the Ellie badge instead of giving him, you
Yes,
know, the next
I
badge up.
really
He
like
gives him
that.
the wife's badge. And I just think, oh, that's so beautiful, you know, showing that, because like you said, you know, when you lose a spouse that late in life, and you don't have that many others, you know, you don't have that many connections. So it's showing that Carl now has another connection, someone that he can share adventures with, and you know, share the rest of his life with. I think it's really beautiful. So great pick. Up is fantastic. I haven't watched it in a few years. I really should rewatch it. But yes, if we ever do like best movie openings, yeah, that movie opening is just fantastic.
It's
So
very
good.
strong. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Alrighty. Well, back to the 90s. Again, I told you there'd be a theme that would appear with mine because it can be very, very predictable sometimes. So I'm going
Pardon.
with a movie that was not a Disney movie, but a lot of people mistook it for a Disney movie. And I think now technically it is a Disney movie because Disney bought the company. But I am going with 1997's Anastasia. So
Okay.
this was a Fox. This was 20th Century Fox, and I think this was one of their earliest 2D animations. And of course, Disney now owns Fox, so I guess technically Anastasia is now a Disney movie. But Anastasia was always one of those movies that everyone would think was a Disney movie, but it was not actually a Disney movie. But they thought that because everything about it screams Disney Renaissance. First of all, the animation is beautiful. Again, it's set in Russia, so we get the beautiful Russian architecture, we get the landscapes, we get the palace, we get the costumes. It's set, in the very early 1900s, so a little bit later than a lot of Disney movies are set, so it actually feels a little bit more modern. Obviously, anyone who knows the story of Anastasia, it's based on that urban legend that she survived the Russian Revolution and that she somehow escaped the assassination of the Romanovs. Now, we obviously all know that that's not true these days, but I love that this movie takes that idea, and she's an orphan now. She's grown up, she's got amnesia, and she meets a con man. So she's voiced by Meg Ryan. The con man is voiced by John Cusack. These two are both very, very good in their respective roles. You definitely get a bit of, rom-com banter back and forth between them two. They definitely have a bit of a Sam and Diane thing going on, and it's really fantastic. Then you've also got Kelsey Grammer, who plays John Cusack's partner, and he used to work at the palace. You've got Angela Lansbury, who voices the Dowager Empress, and she is fantastic. Christopher Lloyd voices the bad guy, who is Rasputin, and of course everyone knows about Rasputin. He's fantastic in this. His villain song in The Dark of the Night is one of my favorite villain songs ever. It is just so good. And Hank Azaria as Bartok, the little bat, is so good. And yeah, just a really, really great cast. The songs, oh my god, are amazing. Anya/Anastasia's I Want song, which is Journey to the Past, is beautiful. You have the haunting Once Upon a December, which is when she remembers her past family. Like I said, you've got the aforementioned In the Dark of the Night. It's just really, really gorgeous. What's really interesting though about Anastasia, and I never really realized this until recently, and again, I was watching a video by Better with Bob, who was doing Anastasia, is it's one of the only films where the main character actually is not aware of the villain until right at the climax of the movie. Basically, Anya is just trying to find herself, and Rasputin is trying to come after her, but she doesn't realize it. And so it kind of lessens the impact when they finally meet face to face at the end. But that aside, Anastasia is a really fun movie. Like I said, lots of banter between her and Dmitri. Anya herself has a really great storyline, rediscovering who she is and rediscovering her old memories. The scene where she's reunited with her grandmother is beautiful, especially because, you've got Angela Lansbury doing the voice there, and she's fantastic. Like I said, again, beautiful, beautiful animation. There's a lot of 3D mixed in with the 2D for this movie, and it works really, really well. And the scenes are just done so beautifully. I love the costuming as well. I see a lot of cosplayers who do Anastasia's dresses because they're so beautiful. And yeah, I think it was one of those films that absolutely could have fit right into the Disney Renaissance era. And I guess technically now it does, because Disney frickin' owns everything. Anastasia from 1997.
Okay. Well, it's another good pick. It's another one I would have to scratch my brains to think if I've actually seen it. It's possible I haven't, because again, it might just be in that era when I, was a teenager and was watching other stuff. But it's definitely a classic, which I hear a lot about and I've seen a lot about, and definitely images. And I can definitely see, I agree about the costume design being really good, and I really do like that cast. So it's one I will try and catch up with. Going back to a Japanese animation, and this is actually a Studio Ghibli film, but it's a very dark Studio Ghibli film, and a very shines a light on a very devastating part of history, and because it's in Japan as well, a Japanese point of view. But it's a film called Grave of the Fireflies.
I think I've heard of that one.
You've heard of it, yes, from the late 80s. And it's set during the World War, but it's from the Japanese perspective.
Oh, yes, that would be very dark.
Yeah, no, it is a very dark movie that follows this particular family and all the torment, all the struggle they're doing to survive during wartime. So it goes into things like the day-to-day of trying to keep themselves eating and keep getting rations, just basic survival things. Realistic type feel to it with the landscape. It does have a little bit of a post-apocalyptic feel, where it's almost this landscape and the earth just being destroyed in a way by what's happening during war times. And yeah, it doesn't hold back when it comes to like showing, you know, people who have been like badly injured or even killed, and like just the devastation of war. And I think because it is a Studio Ghibli film, you do get that sense of magic. You still do get that sense of hope. And I think the fact that it's such a bleak subject makes that stuff even more powerful to it, to go along with, as I said, how bleak it is and how dark it is. And yeah, I think there's great scenes where you just see like the barren land, and like there's scenes that are quite silent, and you just sort of experience it type thing. So it's a very well put together film, a very like realistic film, and a very like, it is a snapshot, like a good sort of look into what life was like. And it's obviously good to get the Japanese perspective, because we're used to a lot of Western movies obviously having only one perspective and not really showing the other side. And yeah, but there is something about like a Studio Ghibli film like this that, as I said, does manage to be quite magical and beautiful, and give you characters you can kind of invest in. So it's an amazing movie, but yeah, it's not an easy one to watch at times. So that's Grave of the Fireflies.
Yeah, oh, that's a great pick. Like I said, I've heard of it, but I haven't seen it. But it sounds really intense, and I imagine Ghibli, though, it would still be quite beautiful, because their animation is really gorgeous. Oh, nice. Well, it's kind of fitting, because my number 4 is also a Studio Ghibli film, but it is a more recent Studio Ghibli film, and it is a much lighter Studio Ghibli film, and that is 2004's Howl's Moving Castle.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I was first introduced to this by a friend of mine about 10 years ago. She just wanted to show it to me. And I remember she said, okay, listen to this voice. Can you tell who it is? And as soon as Hal opened his mouth, I was like, it's Christian Bale, of course. Batman. I'd recognize that anywhere. But no, Howl's Moving Castle, I absolutely love. So it is actually based on a book. And apparently the book is vastly different from the movie, like almost unrecognizable. But the movie itself is a little bit chaotic. But we basically follow Sophie, who is this young girl who works in a hat shop and has heard rumors of Howl and his moving castle. Howl is a magician, and apparently he steals young girls' hearts. Now, Howl ends up actually noticing Sophie, and so does the Witch of the West, or the Witch of the Waste, rather, who is in love with Howl. And so, as punishment for Howl noticing Sophie, the Witch of the Waste puts a spell on Sophie, which turns her into an old lady. And a lot of funny stuff comes about because of this, especially because Sophie herself is very insecure about her looks and very insecure about herself. But once she's an old lady, she just doesn't give a crap. And it's absolutely hilarious and really fun to watch her growth. She ends up coming across Howl and the moving castle, which is like this steampunk monstrosity that looks absolutely amazing on screen. And she moves in with Howl and his little assistant Markle and their crazy dog. And then there's basically shenanigans, and there's a war going on, and the Witch of the Waste catches up to them at one point. It is a little bit of a chaotic story. I'm pretty sure the last time Stephen and I watched it, we were like, this technically doesn't make any sense. There's a lot of questions here, but you get so caught up in the animation. Oh, the Ghibli animation is so beautiful, and this world that they've created in Howl's, it's almost like it's based off London. You can tell that it's definitely based off England, but there's a bit of steampunk going on in this movie, which I actually really like. Some of the war machines are a bit steampunk, and like I said, Howl's castle itself is a bit steampunk, and I just think some of the animation is really good. Sophie's a really fun main character, like I said, especially once she gets turned into an old lady, because she just has no fucks left to give as an old lady, and she's so fantastic. And of course, there's a bit of a romance between her and Hal, and themes of acceptance and coming to accept yourself and learning to love yourself and learning to be the best version of yourself for others. There's also a whole theme of like Hal's heart, which doesn't actually belong to him. Oh, and there's a fire demon called Calcifer, who is voiced hilariously by Billy Crystal, and he is hilarious. So I really love Calcifer. He has a great curse may all your bacon burn. That is a curse. I would not want my bacon to be burnt. And yeah, I just love watching Howls. It has a beautiful score. There's a song called Merry-Go-Round of Life, which you'll often hear in like YouTube shorts. A lot of food channels like to use it because it's this beautiful, calm, like violin piece. And yeah, I really love the score. I really love watching the animation. And because I don't watch a lot of Japanese animation, it's always something different for me when I watch it. You know, I mostly, as you can probably tell from my list, I mostly watch Western animation, Disney and stuff like that. So when I watch Howls, it's a different type of animation, and I really enjoy going into Ghibli Land because Ghibli Land is beautiful. Their films are just gorgeous the way they're animated. I absolutely love them. So yeah, I've loved Hal since I first watched it, despite the fact that it's a bit chaotic and doesn't always make sense, but it's a gorgeous movie. So I really like that your number 5 led into my number 4. So Hal's Moving Castle from 2004.
Yeah, I think Howl's Moving Castle is definitely up there for Ghibli films. It is one of the best, and yeah, they've got such a rich array of films. It is hard to really pick a favorite, but that film is doing a lot of things I really like. I think it's definitely like pastiching classic sort of monster movies in many ways, and you said a steampunk type vibe, which is something a little bit quite different as well. So yeah, no, I absolutely love that movie. Number 4, I'm returning to Pixar, and one of the best sequels maybe ever, I'm going to say. So I've gone with Toy Story 2. Which, if I had to choose, it's very hard between the 3 original movies, but if I had to choose, I think Toy Story 2 might be my favourite. Yeah, a great idea for a sequel, and it managed to like live up to the original movie, which was just so good. Then it almost gets bonus points from me because I think it is really hard to do a great sequel, especially, as I said, if the first film was so good, and you've got to try and match that. And it does it really because it builds on the relationship between Andy and Woody, because this is the one where Andy is going off to like cowboy camp and is starting to like leave Woody behind. You've got the thing where his family is doing like a toy sale. And one of the clever themes about the film is like this idea of how Andy loses interest in cowboys and in Woody, and he's interested in buying space toys, and there's this idea of like, because now you've got like astronauts going to space, like people, they're like the cool American heroes now instead of cowboys. And I do like that as a theme. Like, it's almost like these classic American icons are sort of like cowboys and astronauts in a way. And so that, again, there's this idea behind the movie where as technology develops and as, you know, you can do cooler things, it's almost like the cowboy represents like the older sort of fashion, old school, like American hero, and the astronaut is suddenly this new flash thing which everybody wants to emulate. And you see that mirrored where you've got like this TV show, this Western TV show, but it's been cancelled because people have lost interest. Great array of characters. I really love Joan Cusack as Jessie.
Yeah, because she's Joan Cusack and she's
just
great.
Amazing. Like, her interactions with Woody are great. I love the opening to the movie where it's literally inside the Buzz Lightyear cartoon. That's the way it actually starts. Dinosaur playing the game. So I do love the movie opens like that. The car boot sale scene is very entertaining. You've of course got Wayne Knight Newman as like the villain of the movie, who's playing the greedy guy trying to sell off the doll, and Woody of course needs repairs. I love that scene when like this inventor guy is like trying to fix up Woody. That's a really beautiful scene as well. And yeah, it's just a wonderful idea for a sequel. It's just a wonderful story to continue like the themes of the original movie. And yeah, I do love like just the side things with all the various toys and their reactions to like potentially losing Woody, and how much there is invested in this stuff. I love when they're watching from the window when like Andy's mum is trying to stop the evil guy from like buying Woody or stealing him away, and just how much of like a small adventure that is. And once again, you get a little bit of a heist movie when they go on this adventure to try and rescue Woody. And I really loved, like the tour guide Barbie stuff. That's really funny.
But yeah, it's so good.
Yeah, you've got so many quirky, fun little characters, but once again, just a really satisfying story that sets up its ideas early on, was all the main points, and is just so charming, so much fun. You've got another beautiful song, "I'll Be Your Friend."
What is with you picking the Disney movies that have like the most heartbreaking songs ever? I mean, When Somebody Loved Me, who that?
Yeah. Yeah, it's heartbreaking, and Tom Hanks once again too. He is the only one who could ever play Woody. I mean, he is the ideal Woody. Again, he's doing great work, but yeah, there's so many great characters and great like voice cast in this. As I said, Joe Cusack. You've obviously got, once again, you got John Ratzenberger, who appears in every. He's Cliff out of Cheers, by the way. That's the other thing. But for some reason he seems to have a contract where he appears in every Pixar movie, so you will hear his voice pop up in every one. Wonderful cast, wonderful like family of toys, and I just love the idea for the sequel and just how it's carried out. One day we'll do favourite trilogies, but I think this will be up there. This is one of the most consistent trilogy, because it's a great example of how you do a trilogy where I think each part complements the other films, but it also does its own thing. And I remember the end of 3 being really edge of your seat. It's like, oh, okay, are they really going to do this? Like, this is devastating stuff. And I
left the room.
Yeah, I was on the edge of my seat watching that one in the cinema.
I got so pissed off. Seriously, Stephen made me watch it, and we got to that final scene, and I got up and I was like, if this is the way that these toys go out, I was so mad. I was like, no, this cannot be their ending. They deserve better than this. I was so glad that it didn't.
Yeah, because it probably would have been too brutal, because it crossed my mind they might do it just because they do themes like that.
I'm getting so mad.
And it was such a well done scene, but yeah, it probably would have been too brutal.
Original trilogy, so good. I remember seeing the first movie in the cinema. I was 10 years old. It was the first 3D animation that had ever been like released like that, and I saw it with some friends of mine for a friend's birthday, and I lost my final tooth watching that movie. I remember that. I lost my final baby tooth watching Toy Story. But no, that's a great pick. I love it. So good. But yes, you got to stop picking the Disney movies with the most devastating songs, dude. Like, When Somebody Loved Me is one of the most heartbreaking songs in existence. Oh, so bad. All right. Okay, so we're at top 3 now. Yeah. So my number 3 is another Japanese cartoon. This is the oldest movie on my list. But it's not a Ghibli film. So this is a version of a story that I absolutely love, and this is the Japanese cartoon anime production Hans Christian Andersen, The Little Mermaid. It was released in 1975, and it was done in an anime style. And I had a English dubbed version. I don't know. I think I got this because I loved the original Little Mermaid, and we went to the video store and we found both of these versions. And so I ended up with both the versions at home because we used to tape VHS to VHS. So I was luckily one of those little girls that wasn't traumatized when she finally found out the real story of the Little Mermaid, because I always knew, because this version, it tells the true story. I mean, it does have some embellishments. It's obviously its own movie. It's got a little bit here and there that like a flare up, but it does have the general story, which is where she dies at the end. In this one, the mermaid's name is Marina. We have a similar setup of, she lives under the sea with her father, her grandmother, her 6 sisters. One thing I always really loved about this movie is that every single one of the sisters had a different and very unique hairstyle and her own hair color. So there was like a sister with blue hair, a sister with red hair, a sister with green hair. And in this one, they're given a pearl when they come of age that they fix into their hair, which was really cute. And, it's the usual story. She goes up to the surface, she saves the prince, she goes to the sea witch, all of that. But I love this version. Well, one, because it's the real story. So that was always very devastating, but also really interesting to see when I was younger. And it is done in a really devastating way, this movie, her death scene and all of that. But it's also a really beautiful retelling of the story itself. Marina is a really great character. She's lovely, she's sweet, she's got her own personality, she's adventurous. And when she meets the prince, you know, you really do feel how she falls in love with him. Her sidekick in this is a little dolphin called Fritz. He's absolutely
Nice.
adorable. I love him. The sea witch in this is one of the scariest mofos you will ever see. She is so much scarier than Ursula. Absolutely horrifying. She's got like glowing red eyes and like shiny black teeth, and oh, she's horrifying. And trying to get to her place is a whole ordeal. But no, again, I love the animation. There's a beautiful score and some really beautiful music in this. Again, because it was a different style, like I grew up watching this alongside a bunch of Disney films. So this was a very different style for me and a very different animation than I was used to. So just something very different. And I mean, if anyone has ever seen me talk on this channel, you probably know that I love The Little Mermaid. Just as a story, it's one of my favorite fairy tales because I think it's an absolutely heartbreaking, beautiful story about, you know, unspoken love. And Hans Christian Andersen himself was very much rumored to have been gay, so it could be an allegory, as you know, not
Yeah.
being able to speak love and painful love. And this version is just, it's beautiful, but it is also devastating because when she does die at the end, it's horrifying and so sad. And just the music that they play when she dies is so haunting, and you have this horrible like little thing of like Fritz like swimming through the waters crying out for her, and you're just like, oh my god, she's gone. But then you get the epilogue, which is also in the book, of how she eventually, her soul was allowed to go to heaven, which mermaid souls generally are not allowed to go to heaven. I can't remember why, but and that it
Okay.
also opens and closes with some live action of Copenhagen, and they show you the statue of the Little Mermaid that's there. So you actually get a little bit of background of Hans Christian Andersen worked into it. But yeah, I have loved this movie since I was like 4 or 5 years old. It's available on YouTube if anyone's curious. The English dub is available on YouTube. Just Google Japanese Little Mermaid anime and it will come up straight away. But I would highly recommend it to anyone who does love the Little Mermaid and who does love the Disney version, because it's a great companion piece to watch with the Disney version to get the real story and just get a slightly different version of the mermaid than we're used to. Because most people are used to Ariel, and that's fine because she's a fantastic character. I love Ariel, but it is nice to see, you know, a different version of the Little Mermaid and a different interpretation of her character and of her love for the prince and all of that. So that is my number 3, 1975 Japanese anime, The Little Mermaid.
In the flag for a version which isn't as well known, because until you mentioned it recently, I didn't know of that version. I only knew of like the 90s film or late 80s, I think it is. But that version, like, yeah, I didn't know this other version existed. So
it's beautiful.
Sounds good. Does sound good. Some jolly wonderful songs in this one too. So I ho, I ho, I ho, I ho. It's off to work we go. Do 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 do.
Bad stream.
Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs.
Nice, very
a true
nice.
Disney original.
Yes.
And
One
once again, yeah, we're getting into dark fairy tale sort of vibes here, and you know, really like these early Disney dark fairy tales influenced so many future filmmakers. You know, I think someone like David Lynch, there's an influence on him. You know, like he was inspired. He likes to play with dark fairy tales in his films, but just makes them a little bit more adult. But definitely has that sensibility behind it. But yeah, it just sets up these array of classic characters, and once again you've got the morality of the characters behind the whole thing, this sense of like a family, this sort of discovered family with Snow White and the dwarfs, just sort of how they depend on each other so well. Classic Disney, like hand-drawn animation, you can really paint these locations very convincingly, and like you just get a sense of magic, just a feel for the place. And it also has rules, you know, it sets up classic sort of fairy tale type rules, like the whole thing with like the, you know, the poison apple, You've got a classic Disney villain, like in The Evil Queen. She's one of the best Disney villains ever, like one of the most terrifying. And I love that tradition has continued in other movies, but also when you've had like other versions of like Snow White. Because I found out recently that Diana Rigg played her in a version years later, and Diana Rigg is obviously a great actress, so that would be a good version. I know Sigourney Weaver played her in a version.
Oh yes, that
I think
version
in the
is
late 90s, yeah.
Yes,
But
it's called Snow White. Oh, here's a fun thing for you, Keith. In that version with Sigourney Weaver, Snow White is played by Abby from Dawson's Creek.
Yeah, no, I didn't know that. No,
There you
that
go.
is fun. Yeah, completely different from her Dawson's Creek character. So that's pretty funny. But
horror movie, and that one is really good. It's called Snow White: A Tale of Terror. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I've heard of that one. Yeah, no, I do want to check that one out, definitely. But yeah, no, this one is such a classic. It's such a lovable classic. But again, with Darkness, again, you've got wonderful tunes in it. But you just got these rich array of characters, like the dwarfs. There's just so much personality in them, and so much
I love
life. Doc, yeah. Like everyone has their favorite, and that's the thing. But you just go on this wonderful sort of journey, and it just stands up as this all-time classic, which has influenced so much like media, so much other cinema, and yeah, I think the Evil Queen will always be one of the best villains, really. Yeah, at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
And it just plays with that light and dark throughout the movie. So it's a very fun but also terrifying movie at times. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs.
It's a great choice. I mean, like you said, this is the one that started it all. This was Disney's first animation film, almost bankrupted the studio. They all thought it was going to be a massive disaster, and look at what it spawned. Now, this was one of the ones that we had on VHS. My sister got it for like her 5th or 6th birthday, so we had that one, and we'd watch that one a lot. And it definitely is, like, you can see why it's a classic. The Evil Queen, scared the crap out of me as a kid. That scene where she's transforming into the old hag is horrifying. And then, like, her chase at the end where they chase her to the edge of the cliff, and there's lightning and thunder, and it's all very dramatic. But no, it's a great choice. Love it. Fantastic. Gotta have a bit of classic Disney. All right, so we'll do our number 2s, and then that sounded really bad. And then before we go with number 1, we'll do our honorable mentions. But for my number 2 pick, again, we're in the 90s because I can't help myself. And this time we are going non-Disney again, and we're going a little bit religious, which I know sounds weird, but it worked so well. So my number 2 pick is 1998's DreamWorks' The Prince of Egypt. I love The Prince of Egypt. Okay, first of all, doing a religious story into a cartoon, it doesn't sound like it's going to work. This is kind of like when they did Shakespeare in Disney, but it's worked. But this story, so this is the story of Moses and the slaves of Egypt and the Pharaoh and the 10 plagues, which is a horrifying Bible story, if you know your Bible stories, which, funnily enough, I do, because there's a little bit of insight into me. I went to a Catholic primary school, I went to a Catholic high school, and I have Jehovah's Witnesses as relatives. So I know Bible stories, okay? When I was a child, my Nana used to tell me Bible stories instead of fairy tales, which was very disturbing because Bible stories are not kid-friendly. So this is the story of Moses, and it's just the story of, him leaving Egypt, discovering that he is one of the Hebrews, and then coming back to free the slaves from his brother. The voices in this movie, oh my God. So we have Val Kilmer as Moses, we have Ray Fiennes as the Pharaoh, we have Steve Martin as one of the priestesses, Sandra Bullock as Moses' sister, Patrick Stewart as the big head Pharaoh, Martin Short as another one of the priestesses, Jeff Goldblum is in it. We also have Michelle Pfeiffer. So it is a star-studded cast. Helen Mirren is also in it. So first, we've got an absolutely star-studded cast. Secondly, the animation in this, Oh my God, it is breathtaking. Again, because it's set in Egypt during biblical times. So they really go for it. And they show the 10 plagues, which are horrific. If you know what the 10 plagues are, you know that they are horrifying. And I think the best thing about this movie is it doesn't shy away from the darkness of the religious story. So, like,
Okay.
Moses's first break is when he discovers that his father ordered all of these babies to be murdered. And his father's like, oh, son, they were just slaves. And Moses is like, Jesus Christ. You also have, like I said, the 10 plagues. Now, if you don't know the 10 plagues, 9 of the plagues were things like insects, roaches, swarm, the water turning into blood. The 10th plague, however, is the worst plague. And the fact that they actually showed this in the movie, I mean, they were subtle about it, but they still did it. The 10th plague is the death of the firstborn son in every family.
Okay.
And they show it in the movie. Again, it's subtle, but you see, and it's horrifying. And then that is what finally gets Pharaoh to say, yes, I'll set your people free. And, you know, we see them wander into the desert and the parting of the Red Seas and all of that. But I think the thing with the Prince of Egypt is because they don't shy away from the religious stuff, because they really go hard with all of that, it's an incredibly intense and impactful movie. And it does have some funny stuff to offset it, like Steve Martin and Martin Short as the priestesses. They, you know, provide a bit of the comic relief. Jeff Goldblum's character obviously provides a bit of comic relief. But for the most part, it's a really intense movie. There's also a really cool part. So, at one point in time when Moses is wandering in the desert, when he's left Egypt and he's become one of the Hebrews, he ends up talking to God, who appears to him as a burning bush. And apparently, in the behind the scenes, they had a really hard time trying to figure out how they were going to do the voice of God, because it's like they didn't want to insult anyone, but they wanted to make sure that, you know, they got the magnitude apart. So what they did is they actually layered dozens and dozens and dozens of voices on top of each other so that God sounded kind of like a big chorus kind of talking to Moses. And I thought that was a really smart way to do it. It's also got some beautiful music. If you haven't heard When You Believe, you must go and listen to it. Like, as soon as we get off this stream, you must go and listen to When You Believe, because it is just one of the most beautiful songs I've ever heard. There's also a horrifying song that's about the 10 plagues, which is really intense. And then there's a beautiful one called Heaven's Light, which is when Moses first detaches from the Egyptians and has to learn about his true roots and where he actually comes from. And yeah, it is a fantastic film, and it is insane that it's so good and that it is so palatable to kids, because it is a religious story and it's Moses of all stories. Like, Moses is not a fun story. Like, Moses' story is full of slavery and blood and kids dying and Red Seas partying and being stuck in the desert for 40 years. It's not a pretty story, but they really make it work. It's an absolutely beautiful movie. I saw this when I was a teenager. I took my younger brother and my younger cousin to go see it at the cinema. It was a treat that I took them for a holiday, and we all three of us came out of it just loving that movie. So if you guys haven't seen it, go and see it, because it is just beautiful. I don't know if it's available on Disney Plus because it is a DreamWorks movie, so it may not be available on there. I don't think they've bought DreamWorks yet. It's Disney. I'm sure it will happen at some point. But no, it's intense. It's beautiful. It's very adult, but you can see that it is also palatable towards kids. And yeah, the music's gorgeous. The animation is gorgeous. And like I said, it's got a really, really great cast. And they all do really, really well. So yeah, that's my number 2, The Prince of Egypt from 1990.
Yeah, that's another good suggestion for people. And again, I'm not sure if I've seen it, to be honest. So that's
you must. You absolutely must. So good.
Well, I'll definitely listen to that song later. See myself
When You Believe.
Yeah. When You Believe. But going back to a Japanese animation, and this one, because you mentioned something feeling quite cyberpunk earlier with Hell's Moving Castle. Well, this one is a full-blown cyberpunk type movie, and it is the original version of Ghost in the Shell from the
I've heard of Ghost in the Shell. I haven't seen it, but definitely.
Yeah, it did get a remake, live action, which had Scarlett Johansson in, of course.
Yes, she's very Asian.
She is extremely Asian. Hard to miss, really. So I actually don't mind the remake, but I definitely don't like it as much as the original. Like,
Yeah.
yeah. So the original. So the setup, in case you don't know, it is about this android who has a lot of human qualities. So it's almost like a hybrid between the two. It's for like military purposes, and one day it escapes and it starts getting ideas of like consciousness and the idea of, yeah, this isn't right, I want to actually have a life. So it starts thinking more like a human, and it breaks out of the laboratory and goes on the run, and you've got the military and like the government pursuing it. I know there's a relationship with like the handler who the android has gotten quite close to. And once again, it's just this really high concept, interesting, like sci-fi idea, and it really plays with the line between like machine and human, and this idea of, well, if you make a machine too lifelike, if you give it like human emotions or human physicality and ability, is, you know, where does the line stop? Like, is this just something which you can treat as a machine? Like, at what point will it start getting ideas of, I want to live as a human being, I want to do human being things? And also this classic sci-fi idea of, at what point are you abusing this invention? You're going to give it like human type abilities, well, why shouldn't it have the same sort of freedom as like a human being? That kind of idea. So it's got all these themes. Another reason I think it is a really good animation is because it's an animation that experiments with the form of animation, and actually advances what you can do with animation, because there's a lot of full like action scenes, and those sorts of scenes are really complicated to film, you know, when it's like animation and you've got to try and make it look lifelike, and you've got to get the movements down to a T. So it has a very phonetic type feel to a lot of these action scenes, and they are just really gripping, and like they're just so well done. Like, there's so much skill and craft that goes into it. There's some great use of music in the movie, some great ideas. It's almost quite spiritual at times, but it's a great like sci-fi sort of premise that does have a lot of like realistic sort of political themes behind it and ideas. And yeah, you're just left breathless by it. It's a really intense roller coaster of a ride that, yeah, you just get sucked into. Like, it's such a well done movie, such a at times dreamy and trippy movie. Like, it is quite strange at times as it plays with this idea of like machine versus human. Like, as I said, at what stage does, you know, is the consciousness or the human side taking over? So yeah, I think it's a pretty flawless like movie, and I would say it's one where the story works alongside like the visuals and the action. Like, I think it does fit together well as a complete package, because there are some movies, some animations that can't quite bring the two together, where you think of it as maybe a great visual movie, but maybe it's not quite, the story's not quite holding together. And some movies, it's the other way around. The visuals or the animation isn't so good, but there's something to the stories or characters. Because I know like another Japanese film from the late 80s called Akira, which people seem to love. Yeah, I'm a bit more iffy on that, because I think it does get a little bit messy. Obviously, there are really good visual moments in that movie, but I do think the story is a bit baggy, and it just doesn't come together in the same way. I think this is a really satisfying movie from top to bottom. So yeah, it's an experience, this movie as well, like Ghost in the Shell. I highly recommend. So that's my number two.
Yeah, seen it, but definitely heard of it. It's probably one that Stephen would like a lot, I reckon. But it does sound very
Yeah,
interesting,
sounds
so
like your
might have to
sort
check
of
it out at some
thing.
point.
Yeah.
So should we both do our honorable mentions, and then I'll do my number one, and you can do your number one?
Yeah, that sounds
right.
good.
All right, so I've just got a few, but I just want to list off quickly. So the first one I want to mention is the first cartoon that ever scarred me for life, but it's still a really, really good cartoon. If you ever see this cartoon on the shelves, just remember, just because there is a bunny on the front doesn't mean it's a good movie. I think you know where I'm going. Watership Down, which came out, Watership Down came out in the 70s. It looks like a nice little cute movie about bunnies migrating. No, it's a freaking nightmare about this bunny that has this vision of like their field turning into blood. So they all start to go to like another field in this faraway place. I can't remember what it's called, but like some heaven or haven that they want to reach. But there's a lot of shit that happens along the way, like bunnies fighting each other and dogs ripping bunnies apart and a hunter that wants to kill the bunnies. And there's this horrible scene where the bunnies all get trapped in like a rabbit warren and they're all suffocating. And oh my God. Look, it's a horrifying movie, but it's very well made. Very, very well made. The animation's great. The story is very harrowing. I've read the book too, and it actually does stick quite closely to the book. It's just don't go in blind like I did, and don't be fooled by the cute little bunnies on the front, because they are mean little monsters and they will rip each other apart. So that's one of mine. The next one I want to mention is a movie from the late 80s that I don't know if anyone's really going to see, and I have not been able to find since I was a child. It was called The Nutcracker Prince. It was obviously based on the Nutcracker ballet, about the Nutcracker who comes to life, and Clara, who goes with him to the magical land and meets the Rat King. And the Rat King in this movie scared the ever-loving shit out of me as a child. There is a scene towards the end of the movie where like Clara is literally shooting at him and he is like lunging towards her with like his fangs bared and he's bleeding everywhere, and I could not sleep. But I loved this. It was a Canadian production, came out in the late 80s. Clara is voiced by Megan Follows, who I best know from Anne of Green Gables, which is a miniseries I absolutely adore and a lot of people probably know. But I always liked that one, but I have never been able to find it ever since I was a child. I think because it was a smaller Canadian production, it just really wasn't available. So the next one I want to mention is my favorite of the classic Disney movies, of the Silver Age Disney movies, the really old ones, and that is Sleeping Beauty. I absolutely love Sleeping Beauty. I love it. It's set during like the Renaissance era, and like the animation. I remember finding out that the animators of Sleeping Beauty, they wanted every frame to look like a painting, like you could just hang it on your wall, and you can really see that in the animation. Maleficent is one of my favorite Disney villains. She's absolutely fantastic. And I think Maleficent is one of the few live action Disney remakes that was actually good and actually added to the story. But yes, no, I love Sleeping Beauty from the Silver era. It's probably one of my favorites. Now, with Disney, I have to give some more shout outs to some of the movies from the Renaissance eras, because I love the Renaissance era. So Aladdin, The Lion King, and Beauty and the Beast will always be three of my favorite Disney movies. I saw all three in the cinema. I own all three. All three were with me as I was growing up. They just didn't quite make this list because these other movies I think are better, and I didn't want the list to be completely all movies. I'm sorry, all Disney. Now, you'll have noticed with me that every single movie I've listed has been 2D animation, and that's because I'm not the biggest fan of 3D. There's a fluidity to 2D and something about hand-drawn that just I love more. But if I am going to mention 2 3D movies, actually, no, I might go with 3, but I absolutely love. First of all, I've got to throw a Toy Story movie in there. And for me, it's Toy Story 3. I love Toy Story 3. I think that storyline of like Andy going off to college and the toys going to like a new owner is just so beautiful, except for that incinerator scene, because like I said, that really pissed me off. I was like, no, these toys deserve better. Definitely mention Up, because absolutely Up is beautiful. You said everything you can. And then the last one I want to mention is one of my favorite animated sequels, and I think it is such a great sequel, so much fun, and that is Shrek 2. I love Shrek 2. Yeah. I mean, the original Shrek is fun, but I think the second one is more fun.
I agree.
think the storyline, the storyline's a bit punchier. The character development's a bit better. I absolutely love Julie Andrews and John Cleese as Fiona's parents. Rupert Everett as Prince Charming with his beautiful hair flips, and of course Jennifer. Oh crap! I've forgotten her name. Jennifer Saunders. Saunders. There we go. Yes, Jennifer Saunders as the evil fairy godmother, doing the best rendition of "I Need a Hero Ever," and of course Puss in Boots. Pray for mercy for Puss in boobs.
Yes.
And so, yeah, Shrek 2, definitely. But those are my honourable mentions. What are yours?
Okay, so my first one is A Nightmare Before Christmas, because this was
Of
a, a,
course.
a big favourite of mine growing up, and it's I don't know if they do it anymore, but it always used to be on like Christmas Eve, in the UK on TV. So I would stay up late to watch it. And I think I love it now as well because it feels like this great crossover movie, which somehow merges the Halloween season with the Christmas season. So it feels quite unique because of that. Again, you've got wonderful, joyful, catchy sort of songs, great art design throughout, and I think it really set off like a whole trend later of actual kind of horror movies, but that were family movies as
Yeah,
well.
like
Because
Coraline and Corpse Bride and things like that.
yeah,
Yeah.
it did start that tradition. So I think it's quite an important movie because of that. So it was pretty close. Nightmare Before Christmas. Another classic Disney movie that almost made my list was the original The Jungle Book, which I think
Oh, yeah. The Jungle Book's beautiful.
Again, so much personality, so much color, great characters, wonderful songs with like the jazz.
Han scaring the crap out of everyone.
Yeah, again, another really unforgettable Disney villain in Khan. And yeah, just a great story. And the live action I did actually enjoy. That's one of the best.
This is one of the better live actions.
Yeah, because it stayed quite true to the spirit of the original. Another Japanese one I'll mention is Perfect Blue, and this is another.
I've heard of Perfect Blue. I haven't seen it because I think it might be a bit too intense for me. But
yeah. Again, it has a very intense, very sort of trippy, sort of sci-fi type feel. So it's this like singer in a popular band who has a body taken over, her identity taken over. So it's getting into very like sort of modern voyeuristic things, ideas to do with like social media and what have you, and celebrity. But it's a very good movie, but yeah, it is a very unsettling movie at times. Another one which is like an Iranian animation, this is Persepolis, which is like, sort of covers the situation in Iran, and but it's actually it's a stop motion type animation. Like they use like the roper scope type technique for it, and and you follow this one particular character who's like a young girl growing up in Iran. So you see the film through her eyes, and again, it manages to have this powerful, like almost uplifting type feel to go along with how dark it is and but again, quite relatable.
Kind of familiar. Like I feel like I've heard you talk about this one before.
I might have done. It's actually been a while since I've seen it. Like if I'd rewatched it in time, I might have added it to the list. But it's certainly close, and I think for recent animations, it stands out as being quite distinct. One of the best uses of "Eye of the Tiger" as well. That song.
Wouldn't have expected that.
It's a great musical moment. No, you wouldn't expect it. So that's a very strong movie, and again, can show you that animation can do many different things. Also, another classic Disney animation, another classic Disney villain, 101 Dalmatians with Cruella de Vil. Yeah. Yeah, that's wonderful. I just love like the design of the dogs in that, and what a memorable villain she is. I think probably the animation in that, like the film's better, but obviously the later live action, Glenn Close is just so amazing.
So good. She was so good.
He takes that villain to a whole new level. So sort of icy. And for my other honourable mention, this is just another sort of different one, which I just happened to see, but it's actually the film which is credited as being the very first animation, and it's a German film from the silent era, and it's called The Adventures of Prince Ahmad. And I'll say it's a film that's a little bit special just because like a mate of mine runs a silent movie club once a month.
Yes, yes.
and
Mm.
and it was the first screening of that I went to, like the first one I went along, and it was this movie. As I said, it's credited as being the first animation, and it's basically like a twist on the Arabian Nights story. That's what the story is. It's like a different version of that, and that's a very impressive movie. Like, again, quite sort of trippy the way it's sort of all put together, but very sort of memorable and ahead of its time. But just an interesting part of film history, I think, because of what it is. And so I had to put that as an
Cool.
honorable mention. So that's one. Yeah, I'm sure you can find it out there somewhere. But The Adventures of Prince Ahmad. So yeah.
Well, look, we're at number one, and Keith, you know me, all right? You've seen my favorite movies, you've seen my favorite 80s movies. You know what number one is going to be. But for those who don't know or haven't visited the channel, for my number one, we are going Under the Sea. Under the Sea. It's The Little Mermaid, the Disney version from
Great choice.
1989. Look, this is one of my top 10 favorite movies of all times. I absolutely love The Little Mermaid. This was the first movie I ever saw in the cinema. I saw it twice. I was 4 years old. I still remember sitting in like the front row because my friend's brothers wanted to sit in the front row and seeing Ursula grow to like 1,000 feet tall. That was terrifying. But no, it's a movie that has always stayed with me. I've talked about it before, but Ariel is the Disney princess I identify with the most. Her relationship with Triton very much reminds me of my relationship with my own father, especially because my dad even looks a little bit like King Triton. It's a little scary.
Right, okay.
And just really loved her story. And this movie, it never gets old for me. The songs are fantastic. Under the Sea won an Oscar. I know that this was the film that kicked off the Disney Renaissance. You know, before this, the animation was almost dying. They had done the Black Cauldron, which was not well received. So everything was kind of on the line for this one. And Jodie Benson as Ariel, she always voices Ariel in every single incarnation. My husband loves the Kingdom Hearts games. She's Ariel in that. I used to watch the TV series. She's Ariel in that. She always does the voice, and she's beautiful. She's fantastic. Again, it's Disney, so the animation is gorgeous. I particularly love the animation for this one because we are under the sea. I think they said something about like the number of bubbles that they had to like hand draw for this scene was in like the hundreds of thousands, but it really pays off because it really gives you, you know, the impression of fluidity and like she's moving through the ocean. Everything about it's beautiful. The sea life is gorgeous. Ariel is loosely modeled off Alyssa Milano, of all people. I can never see it.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, no, she is. Her facial features are loosely modeled off Alyssa Milano.
Okay.
And yeah, just everything about the movie is beautiful. And I like the Disney movie that gives us a happy ending. I talked about earlier how I do like the original story, but you do want a happy ending sometimes. You know? So it's nice to see Ariel get her prince. And I am a staunch defender of Ariel because the woke modern crowd love to come for her because they love to do the whole she gave up her voice for a man thing, ignoring the fact that she literally has a whole song about how she wants to be human before she ever meets Eric. But yeah, I'm always in Ariel's corner. So this is no surprise to Keith and probably no surprise to anyone who's watched our movie list before, but that is my number one. It will probably always be my number one. The Little Mermaid, Disney, 1989.
Yeah, no, it's a great choice. It has some of the best songs of any Disney movie, and you're right. There is something about the sea setting, like you can make it so beautiful and vivid, and you know, I love when they create this sense of a whole other world under the sea. And, like, it's so romantic,
beautiful,
and lovely film.
Ursula is one of my favorite Disney villains. She's fantastic.
Yes,
just so good.
She's very
love her.
Yeah, it's a great movie. No, it's very strong. Well, so I'm going to keep it like short and sweet, really. But I am sticking with classic Disney, and this is one I rewatched recently. But my number one is Bambi. Because,
my God, Bambi.
Yeah. Again, very devastating movie. Again, you know, it's a coming of age movie. It uses like the deer as like, you know, this metaphor for like coming of age. And once again, like there's just so much detail to all these different animals and how they coexist in the jungle. And I sort of like how quite early on in the movie it all seems quite sweet natured and they're all in harmony, but as the movie goes on, it becomes a little bit more like a horror movie almost, where there is
Oh
like
yeah.
jeopardy, and that's what I love about
Fire scene. Oh my
yeah.
god, it's horrifying.
Yeah, no, it's actually quite tense, and that's what I like about classic Disney. There are stakes, there is a sense of jeopardy, yeah, and again, it's telling important lessons. You know, this idea of eventually losing her mother, who she's depended on, or sorry, he's depended
Bambi's a
on.
dude.
I know, I did make that mistake the other day as well, because I'm used to Bambi
He's
being
so pretty.
more of a female name. No, he is very pretty. But yeah, that was yeah, it's a really sad part of the movie. Interesting visual of like his father kind of. So there's a way that it's you're eased into it a little bit, and it actually happens half an hour before the end of the movie, and I think that's a good little choice because it means the movie doesn't really end on too much of a downer, and it means you get to see Bambi grow after that and develop. You know, you sort of see like him develop feelings for like a female, like he gets his own sort of love interest, and once again with Disney, like you get all these cute, quirky characters. Like you get like the skunk character. I mean, how they actually make a skunk, you know, sort of cute and endearing. It sort of is the genius of classic Disney. And yeah, no, it's a beautiful movie, and I do like the attention to details and how like the forest scenes are drawn, and yeah, how you get a whole sense of like this community and the different characters, and how it can be like really fun and playful 1 minute, but also quite scary the next. It really shows the different extremes of almost growing up, really. So yeah, it's one of Disney's best films, I think, still. So Bambi packs a punch.
But that no, I haven't seen Bambi in a long time, but I remember it's definitely beautiful. Like the forest scenes are gorgeous, and the way, like you said, the way they draw the animals, and then yeah, that way that kind of lulls you into like this false sense of security. Like it's so cute, we're in the woods and everyone's happy. And, oh no, now Bambi's mother is dead and there's a forest fire coming towards us. But no, it is a gorgeous film, and I think Bambi, because it is more about like because there's not a lot of that much dialogue. Like Bambi himself doesn't actually speak that much, so
No,
it's more about like visuals. Yeah. It always makes me think though of an episode of Friends. There's an episode of Friends where they're all teasing Chandler because he can't cry, and they're listing all of his movies, and they're like, "You didn't? What about in Bambi? Nope. You didn't cry when Bambi's mother got shot? Yes, it was very sad when the man stopped drawing the deer."
Yeah.
But no, that's a great pick from the original. That's a fun list. I really liked hearing your picks.
Thank you. Yeah, and yours. Yeah, there was a lot of diversity in the two lists, and should be some good ideas for people.
We didn't have any crossover. This is where we didn't have any.
No, I'm a bit surprised, but sometimes it's best as well because it means literally people have 20 different movies, you know, which they can. There'll be some which people haven't seen for sure, so that's good.
Your list was a little bit more varied than mine. Again, when it comes to these sorts of things, and we were talking about this a bit off camera, I tend to go for movies that have been with me for a very long time and that I have a lot of nostalgia for. That's why I said you'll see a pattern emerge, which is basically 90s animation. Yeah, because they're the ones that I grew up with and I grew up loving. And like I said, I don't have anything against 3D animation. I just much prefer 2D animation. It's just, for me, it's just much more fluid, and they can just do a lot more with it. It's just prettier somehow.
There's a lot of good, I do like your Hell's Moving Castle choice, because I think with Studio Ghibli I was tempted to like pick another one, but I think it just suffers a bit because there's so many good ones, so it's quite hard to, because you know Princess Mononoke is another favorite of mine. I think that's
that one. No, I haven't seen that one. But I've got to watch Spirited Away again. I haven't seen that one for a while, and Ponyo was cute.
Ponyo, yeah, that's a fun one. Ponyo, that song that'll stick in your head afterwards. But yeah, Yeah, so it was quite hard to sort of pick them. So there's definitely like My Neighbor Totoro. I love that
Yes.
one. So that's another sort of honorable mention. So yeah, no, it was a fun list. Good one to
Yeah.
do. Yeah, so
Pepper keep
yeah.
calling me a hoe. It's got to stop.
Yeah, that was weird. That came up twice. So I don't know how I
It's a
did. Yeah.
saying, huh?
That is
Huh?
weird. Yeah. Yeah, that could be the end of a beautiful friendship. Well, okay, we'll be back with more in the new year. We'll be back with more lists in the future, but we wish you all a Merry Christmas. If you want to suggest lists which we can do in the future, let us know in the comments below. Rachel, if you want to promote your channel.
As you can follow me, Rachel Macdonald, video essays on TV shows and movies. I also have my Tumblr and my Instagram linked through my YouTube channel. So come and follow me there.
Okay, thanks, guys. Have a great holiday season, and we'll see you again soon. Goodbye.